Okay, any more questions? Wait for more time, Shajit, or shall we start?
Sir, you can start it.
Okay. So I think yesterday, sorry, in the previous class, we were discussing about the importance of optical communication, and I stressed the fact that because of the prominence of optical communication, so nowadays people have started laying these cables, these submarine cables beneath the sea. So these cables are also called as transoceanic lines. So they are also called as transoceanic lines. So in fact, they are actually a bunch of optical cables, optical fiber cables that connects that connects various continents and various cities. So in fact, nowadays, when you are trying to search, so sitting at India, if you are trying to search someone, some information from Google, so probably the server will be situated somewhere in California or somewhere in Europe, and the information from that server is being fetched to your location through all this optical communication, all these cables. Okay, so so nowadays you all know that internet is pretty cheap these days. But if you look back, so probably in India, as far as I remember, internet was first introduced somewhere in the year 1994-95. So 94-95. So at that time, you could see the speed. The maximum speed that was available for us was something like 128 kilobits per second. So this was the maximum speed that was available to us, and all our internet communication usually happened through what you call as a telephone modem. So nowadays you will hardly find any telephone modems. So if you have a landline connection in your home, so usually you will be having a modem that is attached to that, and all the data links, in fact, all the data packets will be sent and received through these copper cables. So the telephone cables are nothing but a pair of copper wires. So at that time, the speed was limited, something like 10 kilobits or something like 100 kilobits, and it was damn expensive those days. But nowadays, you would see that because of the increased demand from the people, and also because of the fact that optical fiber cables are being laid throughout. So nowadays, you will see that the data cost is pretty low. So the reason why internet is becoming very cheap, and internet has become something like our essential commodity in life, is all because of the exponential growth what we had in optical fiber technologies and and optoelectronics and other optoelectronic devices. Okay, so now some of the improvements in fact, some of the improvements in some of the uh, reasons why internet became very common was due to the fact that in the year 1963, we actually developed the very first compound semiconductor laser. So I would once again request all of you to go through the basics of optoelectronic devices, what we have studied in our third semester. So in 1963, people could first develop the laser made out of semiconductor devices or semiconductor material. The advantage of compound semiconductor laser, the primary advantage of compound semiconductor laser is that, so the first advantage is that the size is very small. So it's a compact device. So you have a laser which is very small. So that is the first advantage. The second advantage is that because of the fact that you are using compound semiconductors, you could easily change the wavelength of the light that is being emitted from the laser simply by changing the material composition. So to recall the concept, so please recollect the fact about ternary and quaternary semiconductor materials, what we have studied. So we have studied about this particular material. So aluminum, gallium, arsenide. So if you recollect, the energy gap, the band gap energy of this material is actually decided by the X composition, the aluminum composition. So this is a ternary material because you are having 3 elements here. So similarly, you can also have another material which is called as a quaternary semiconductor material. For example, indium, gallium, arsenide, phosphide. So indium X, gallium 1 minus X, arsenic Y, phosphorus 1 minus Y. So this is a quaternary semiconductor material. So because you are having indium, gallium, arsenic and phosphorus. So 4 elements there. So again, the energy gap of this material is decided by the value of X and Y. So you can change the material composition, thereby you can change the energy gap of the semiconductor material. So if you change the energy gap, you know that energy gap is nothing but the separation between the conduction band and the valence band. So EC and EV. So this energy separation is what you call as the energy gap. So this energy gap is decided by the X and Y composition. And you know that a photon, the wavelength of the photon that is getting emitted from a particular material, for example, lambda is given by 1.24 divided by Eg. So lambda in micrometer is given by 1.24 divided by Eg in electron volt. So this energy gap can be adjusted. So this energy gap is nothing but the separation between the conduction band and the valence band, which can be adjusted by changing the material composition. So that means you can change the wavelength of the light. You can design a laser having a particular wavelength, which can emit at a particular wavelength simply by changing the material composition. So this was one of the biggest advantage of semiconductor laser, which is not unfortunately available with the conventional lasers, with the other lasers, other kind of lasers. So these two are the primary advantages of semiconductor lasers. So one is their small size, and because their size is small, they also consume extremely small amount of power. And the other thing is you can change the energy gap, you can tune the wavelength that is being emitted from this laser simply by changing the material composition. So this this technology was put forward in the year 1963. So in fact, it was these two people who first proposed that by using a heterojunction. So heterojunction. So if you don't recollect what heterojunction is, go back to our third semester discussions and what we had in our third semester. So these two people, they proposed that by using heterojunctions, we can actually make semiconductor lasers. In fact, semiconductor lasers was possible because of the invention of heterojunction, and because of that, these two people, they got the Nobel Prize in the year 2000. So one issue was solved. So if you recollect here, if you recall this slide, so people, they always concluded, so they understood the fact that operating at higher frequency is always better, so that you can send more information. But the barrier for achieving this was, so the first barrier was that you never had an optical source. You never had a source which can emit at very high frequencies. In other words, laser was not invented at that time. In fact, so compact laser were not developed. So that was the first drawback, or that was the first bottleneck. The second bottleneck was that even if you develop a laser, you need some medium to transmit that. You need some channel to transmit that. So these were the two bottlenecks. So the first one was the lack of a coherent optical source. This was the first thing that was missing. The second thing that was missing was there was no proper transmission medium through which you can send light signals over a very, very long distance. You can send light signals over a short distance by simply through air. For example, if you shine a torch bulb, the signal would get transmitted, let's say a few hundreds of meters. But beyond that, the signal from the torchlight will not propagate because of the severe attenuation what the atmosphere will offer. So people recognize that. So we can achieve free space communication, but only over a short distance because of the atmosphere, because a lot of dust and other impurities and water vapor, all those things that are present in atmosphere, they will severely attenuate the optical signal. So they recognize that we can't send signals through free space over a large distance. So we need to use some kind of special cables or waveguides which can be used for sending optical signals. So these were the two bottlenecks that was remaining. So in the year 1963, the first bottleneck was overcome. So we invented semiconductor laser, and then in the year 1966, in fact, this person named Charles Kao. So he invented optical fiber. In fact, he invented optical fibers who was having extremely low loss. Yeah, any questions? Yeah, so if you don't have any questions to ask, so can you all please mute the microphone? Okay, thank you. So the first and the second bottlenecks were overcome in the year 1963 and 1966. So these are two milestones that happened in the history of information and communication technology. So even though he proposed, so people recognize that we can use an optical fiber. An optical fiber is nothing but you have a so this is a coaxial cable, but coaxial cable made out of silica. Silica is nothing but silicon dioxide. So you have a sender region which is called as the core, and then you have another region that is surrounding that you call as the cladding. So core and cladding, both these cores and so both the core and cladding, they are made out of silicon dioxide and nothing but silica. They are nothing but silica. So you also call it as a silica fiber. Silica fiber. It's nothing but an optical fiber which has a core and a cladding. So you would note that the core has a slightly higher refractive index compared to cladding. So why the core should have a slightly higher refractive index, we'll see that very soon. So people recognize the important fact that we can use an optical fiber to send information signal, but still there was an issue. The issue was that even though optical fibers were invented, they realized the fact that the losses in the very first optical fiber that was manufactured was extremely high. So even though they could make an optical fiber, the losses in the optical fiber were so large that the attenuation also was large. So if the attenuation is large, then the signals cannot be sent over a large distance. And it was this man, this Charles Kao, who recognized the important fact that the losses in an optical fiber is because of the presence of impurities. So he recognized, he discovered that the losses in the optical fiber or the high attenuation in optical fiber is because of the presence of impurities in silicon dioxide. So when you make optical fiber out of silicon dioxide, so when you take silicon dioxide and make an optical fiber, there'll be large amount of impurities that are present. So these impurities would actually attenuate. They will attenuate the light. They will destroy the light. So how they will destroy, we'll study that very soon. So the losses in the very first optical fiber was the presence of impurities. So then he proposed that if you can remove the impurities, if you can minimize the presence of impurities, then you can make optical fibers having extremely low loss. So he started working on that. He started working on techniques that can reduce the impurities in optical fiber, thereby make optical fibers having extremely low loss. So in 1976, people could develop optical fibers having a low loss of 1 dB per kilometer. So remember, if you say that you have a loss of 3 dB, if I say that I have a loss of 3 dB, that means the optical power gets reduced by half. So half of the power is lost. So 1 dB per kilometer. So if the light travels over a distance of 1 kilometer, the loss is only 1 dB. Whereas, so again, there were significant developments in the area of optical fiber. So again, they found, they discovered, in fact, they started developing lasers that can emit at 1.3 micrometer. So they started developing lasers that are emitting at 1.3 micrometer. And in the year 1979, they also developed a laser which can emit at 1.55 micrometer. The very first compound semiconductor laser, so which was discovered in the year 1963. So that was based on gallium arsenide. It was based on gallium arsenide, and the emission wavelength was somewhere around 850 nanometer, or in other words, 0.85 micrometer. So from 0.85, people started moving towards 1.3 micrometer. They again started moving towards 1.55 micrometer. And we will very soon see the reason why people were moving towards longer wavelengths. So in the year 1979, so 1.55 micrometer lasers based on semiconductors were developed, and also the optical loss, or sorry, the losses in optical fibers could be made as small as 0.2 dB per kilometer. So this was a big, big improvement that happened in the area of optical communication. So nowadays, the optical fibers, the losses is even less than 0.2 dB per kilometer. Now compare this with the losses what you have in coaxial cables. For example, in the case of coaxial cables, or in the case of optical, in the case of these cables, for example, these RF cables or the microwave cables, the losses are at least 10 to 20 times larger than this one. The losses are extremely large, whereas optical fibers have an extremely small loss. And because of these improvements, from 1980 onwards, there was a big commercialization of optical communication technology. So people recognize the importance. They found they all recognize that compared to any other technology that is existing, it's always better to lay optical cables throughout, and thereby we can communicate much easier. And because of that, in the year 2010, or in the year 2010, you would see that the commercialization of optical internet started. In fact, it was first coined as optical internet, but then they removed this word optical. So it's actually internet. So even though you say internet, it's actually based on this optical communication technology. So it's all based on this optical fibers. It has a core and a cladding, and you would see that it has a core and a cladding, and you would see that it's basically a cylindrical dielectric waveguide. It's a coaxial cylinder, and it's a dielectric waveguide because it's made out of silicon dioxide. You know that silicon dioxide is an insulator, or in other words, it's a dielectric material. And through this, photons or light propagate by a phenomena called as total internal reflection. So you all might have studied about, I'm sure that you all have studied about total internal reflection. So this is the mechanism by which light flows through these optical fibers by total internal reflection. So here, if you have a transmitter, and then here, if you have a receiver, so here you have a laser that is transmitting. So this laser beam It flows through this optical fiber by total internal reflection, and finally it reaches the photodetector, which the photons fall, and the material absorbs the photon, creates an electron in the hole, and that electron in the hole corresponds to the information what you are sending from this side. So that's how the optical fiber technology works, or the optical communication system works. All right. So the fact that you can send information, or you can send light through a dielectric medium is not something new. In fact, this concept was proposed by multiple people. For example, Tyndall, Babinet, Faraday, multiple people in the year somewhere around 1800s and 1850s. So if you just take a glass of water and then you just make a hole here, so you would see that water would start falling. And if you can shine a beam of light, you would see that this light also gets guided by this this stream of water. So in fact, this experiment was conducted in the year in the mid 1850s, and people call this as light pipe. So in fact, this is one of the very first experiments which actually gained the curiosity of people for sending light. Now you can also find optical fiber. You can also find some kind of natural optical fibers. You can find, in fact, you can find optical fibers in nature. Can you guess where you can see that? So I will not describe that in much detail, but I would give this hint to all of you. So please explore more. So have you all seen, or at least have you heard about a polar bear? So polar bears are the bears that usually survives in the Arctic, in the North Atlantic, and towards the North Pole. You would find these polar bears, or at least those bears which usually survive in the cold weather. So you would see that the fur of the polar bear is all white in color. So the fur on the polar bear is usually it's actually a strand of optical fiber. So you know that in the polar regions, the amount of sunlight is very less, and polar bears need to maintain their body temperature. So the fur that is there on the body, it actually traps the light, just like how an optical fiber would do. So it would trap the light, whatever light is being present in the atmosphere. So it would trap the light so that after multiple total internal reflections, the photons would ultimately reach the surface of the skin surface of the polar bear, so that it can maintain the warmth, it can maintain the body temperature. So read about this. Okay, so it's beyond the scope of this course to discuss on these things, but it's actually a naturally inspired optical fiber. Okay, so in fact, there is also there's a big Indian name in the area of fiber optics. For example, so there is this person, Professor Narendra Singh Kapani. I think he was originally from Punjab, and he moved to United Kingdom for pursuing his PhD. And it was this person, he's an Indian, so it was this person who first coined the word fiber optics. So nowadays fiber optics is very common, but it was this person who coined the word fiber optics, and also it was this person who developed the very first optical endoscope. And also he developed techniques to transmit images through optical fiber. So if you don't know what is an optical endoscope, so this is what an optical endoscope is. So suppose you have some kind of injury or some kind of ulcers inside your stomach. So it's very difficult to see the inside of your stomach. So what you do is you can actually send a bunch of optical fiber, a tube inside your esophagus, goes inside your stomach, and then you can use this bunch of optical fibers to see the inside of stomach, and you can easily image that. So nowadays optical endoscopes are commonly used by doctors to examine the anatomy inside your body. So it's also used for localized illumination. It's used for various other kinds of sensors. There are a lot of other applications of optical fibers. Optical fibers is not just used only for communication. It's not just used only for sending optical signals from a transmitter to receiver. But there are a lot of other applications as well. However, among all the applications, the predominant application for optical fiber is still used. It's majorly used for sending information signal from transmitter to receiver. So any questions so far?
No, sir.
All right. All right. So in this slide, you can just see an image of, you can see a graph where, so we have plotted the attenuation. Attenuation is simply the loss. Attenuation is used for an optical fiber is usually denoted as dB per kilometer. That means how much signal is being lost after the optical signal travels per kilometer. So on the y-axis you have dB per kilometer, and on the x-axis you will see the wavelength. So if you recall, whenever we are talking about optical communication, we are talking about signals or optical signals that are being transmitted between 0.8 micrometer to 1.7 micrometer. That's the range over which, so if you're sending any signal in this range, then you call it as an optical communication system. So in early 1970s or in early 1960s, so in early 1960s or early 1970s, when people first introduced the concept of an optical communication system, the very first wavelength that was used was somewhere around 850 nanometer, somewhere around 850 nanometer. So somewhere in this range, 850 nanometer. So at that time, they had made some optical fiber out of silica, but the very first optical fiber had a very large optical loss. Though it was used for sending and receiving information signals, the loss was extremely large. So the very first optical fiber, which was developed in the early 1970s, it had an attenuation profile, something like this. That means at that time, the very first laser that was then available was emitting at 850 nanometer, and therefore they obviously used this laser to send signals through the optical fiber. So you call this window as the first optical window for communication. The very first optical window for communication. So nowadays we don't work at first optical window. This I am discussing only because of its historical importance. So now what happened? So people recognize, also people realized that in 1970s they found that, well, optical fiber, we can use it for sending on information, but unfortunately the loss is something like 5 or 10 dB. The average loss is something between 5 to 10 dB per kilometer. That's a huge loss. More than, in fact, around 60 to 70% of the power is being lost by sending it over just 1 kilometer. So if the loss is so large, then this technology, optical technology, cannot compete with microwave and other radar technologies. So if this technology has to be dominant, then what should you do? You should reduce the loss. So people started working, people started improving optical fibers, and in 1980s, they developed optical fibers which had a loss something like this. So this 1980s, you can see that the loss became very small. So they found that the loss became very small, and people also realized that. So now you would see that the minimum loss happens. So the minimum loss for the optical fiber is somewhere around 0.5 dB per kilometer. So that's a very good thing. But this loss happens at what wavelength? It happens at 1.3 micrometer, somewhere around 1300 nanometer. So there was always a competition between the optical fiber and semiconductor laser. Sorry. So there was always a competing, so these two were always a competing technology. So if the losses become small, then obviously people who are working on semiconductor lasers will also have to find a semiconductor laser that can operate at that particular wavelength. So the second window corresponds to a wavelength around 1300 nanometer. So you call this as the second window, somewhere around 1300 nanometer, not exactly 1300, but somewhere around 1300 nanometer. So people still improved. So people found that even for the second generation, or in 1980s, they found that if you can operate at 1550 nanometer or somewhere in the longer wavelength range, the losses would still be less. So people further improved optical fiber. People even developed lasers that can operate at longer wavelengths, and ultimately in 1990s or in early 2000, they developed optical fibers which had a loss of something like 0.2 dB per kilometer. So something like 0.2 dB per kilometer, and this extreme low loss happens at a wavelength somewhere close to 1550 nanometer. So nowadays, at present, that means in 2021 or in 2022, this is the wavelength. In fact, this is the dominant wavelength at which all the optical communications through optical fiber is happening. In fact, there are still some systems that are operating at 1300 nanometer. So in fact, so I can say that it's 1300 nanometer and 1550 nanometer. So these two are the wavelength at which the modern optical communication systems are working on. So beyond this wavelength, you would see that the losses in optical fibers, the losses in silica optical fibers, they are extremely large. So now so nowadays we are operating at this wavelength. Now there is additional advantage. Why there is additional advantage if you can operate at 1300 nanometer? So as the signal is flowing through an optical fiber, it's not just the loss that happens. So because of loss, you have attenuation. So you have attenuation. So you lose the signal amplitude. Attenuation always results in the reduction of signal amplitude. But it is not just the signal amplitude that happens. You also have what you call as dispersion. So what is dispersion? So if you recall, a rectangular optical pulse that is being sent through an optical fiber, when it reaches the receiver, the signal, the pulse broadens and it becomes something like this. So if I have two pulses that are being sent, so let's say this is the first pulse and this is the second pulse. So these two pulses would broaden in time domain. Then what would happen? The second pulse would also broaden. So these two pulses would overlap. So if these two pulses overlap, the receiver will not be able to decide whether it has received a 1 or a 0. So if it cannot decide whether it has received a 1 or a 0, then it makes an error. And if the number of errors become large, then your signal, your demodulation is no more faithful. So your transmission system is no more faithful because you're not able to properly identify whether you have sent a 1 or a 0. So these two things are inevitable in optical fibers. They will always happen. But what you can do is you can always minimize them. So you can wisely choose the wavelength so that you can minimize the attenuation or you can minimize the dispersion. Now for an optical fiber, for a silica based optical fiber, it turns out that if you can operate somewhere near 1300 nanometer, it turns out that the dispersion is the lowest. So dispersion is the lowest if you can operate somewhere around 1300 nanometer. Likewise, the attenuation becomes the lowest, or in other words, the loss becomes the lowest if you can operate somewhere around 1550 nanometer. So that's the importance of 1300 nanometer and 1550 nanometer. So at 1300 nanometer, silica optical fibers have the least dispersion, whereas at 1550 nanometer, it has the least attenuation. So you should always remember these two wavelengths. At 1300, you have the least dispersion. So broadening is the minimum, dispersion is minimum. Whereas at 1550 nanometer, you have the least loss or the least attenuation. Any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so here is Charles Cow. So this picture was taken long back when he was working in United Kingdom for developing optical fibers. So in fact, he published a very important paper. The paper is called as Dielectric Fiber Surface Waveguides for Optical Frequencies. So I would suggest all of you, not suggest, I would ask all of you to download this paper and read this. So it's a reading assignment for all of you. So please read this paper, Dielectric Fiber Surface Waveguides for Optical Frequency. So you can just Google this paper. It's freely available in internet. So this is the very first paper that was published by this person on optical fibers. And in fact, for his invention, he got the Nobel Prize in Physics in the year 2009. So half of the prize, I think, went to, I don't remember, it was half or 1/3. So in fact, there were 3 people who got the Nobel Prize in Physics in the year 2009. So these 2 people, they, in fact, they invented what you call as the CCD sensor, charge coupled device sensor. So this is a sensor what is nowadays commonly used in our mobile phone cameras and various kind of sensors. So the unfortunate thing is that though he discovered, in fact, he invented he proposed the concept of optical fibers in the year 1963 or 1966. When he got the Nobel Prize, he had this dementia. He had almost lost all the memory, so he couldn't really appreciate what prize he got, or he couldn't really appreciate the importance of that award because he was too old, and then he had the issue of dementia, Alzheimer's disease. Anyway, all right. So the attenuation. So attenuation has to be. So you'll always have to minimize attenuation. So the primary advantage in minimizing attenuation is that you can increase the distance between transmitter and receiver. So if the loss is very small, you can increase the you can increase the distance between the transmitter and receiver, or even if the distance is very large, you can actually minimize. So I said that we usually keep another device between this. So you call it as the repeater. So you can always minimize the repeaters what you can use. So if the repeaters are small, the overall cost would also be small. And if the overall cost is less, then more people would start using that technology. And that's the reason why nowadays internet is very cheap. All right, the other something which is of historical importance. So the very first optical communication link, which was developed somewhere around 1970s, was based on an 850 nanometer optical fiber, and this was the maximum speed. So 44 megabits per second. And the distance was something like 10 kilometer. And later on, people increased the distance to 50 kilometer, and the speed got improved. It became something like 2 gigabits per second. Whereas people further improved it to 70 kilometers, and the speed also doubled. So you will see that the improvement is not linear. So here you have a double, you almost double the speed, but the distance cannot be doubled. It's not 100, it's only 70. So the very first optical communication systems that was using 850 nanometer, the sources were based on the optical sources were based on gallium arsenide and aluminum gallium arsenide. The sources were based on gallium arsenide and aluminum gallium arsenide, whereas the photodetectors were based on silicon. So silicon, even though, so you know that silicon is an indirect bandgap material, but even though it's an indirect bandgap material, it can still absorb photon and create electrons and holes. So you can have indirect transitions. But however, indirect transitions are always less efficient compared to direct transitions. But nevertheless, silicon photodetectors are still being used because the cost is less. Whereas when you started moving towards 1300 and 1500 nanometers, people started using these compounds, these materials, indium gallium arsenide phosphides. So people started using indium gallium, people started using quaternary semiconductors, and the photodetectors were also based on indium gallium arsenide or indium gallium phosphides. So they were using quaternary semiconductors. Now for an optical communication link, it's not just enough that you have a transmitter and a receiver. So what else do you need? So you need to have a transmitter, you need to have a receiver. Obviously you must be having an optical fiber. But apart from that, between transmitter and receiver, you also need to have a repeater. You also need to have a repeater. So there are two kinds of, so repeaters are basically amplifiers. They are basically, so these are basically amplifiers. So what does an amplifier do? It takes a weak signal and simply strengthens it. However, in our optical communication system, the signal is not an electrical signal. What is it? It's actually an optical signal. It's a photon. So in your electronic circuits lab, whenever you are using a common emitter amplifier, a common emitter amplifier can amplify only electrical signals, not optical signals. So there are two ways by which you can amplify optical signals. One is by using, so what do you do if you have a, so if the signal is getting transmitted through an optical fiber, the signal weakens. So you have a weak optical signal. This weak optical signal can be given to a photodetector. The photodetector converts the weak optical signal to a weak electrical signal. This weak electrical signal can be given to an electronic amplifier, which can amplify it, and that strong signal can be once again converted to optical signal. So that is the conventional way of amplification. You first convert the weak optical signal to a weak electrical signal, amplifies it by using an electrical amplifier like a common emitter amplifier and op-amp, and then that strong electrical signal is being converted to an optical signal. So you can use electrical circuits for amplification. The drawback is that you will have to always convert optical to electrical, and once again you will have to convert electrical to optical. So you have what you call as an optical to electronic to optical conversion. Now this conversion is always slow because electrical circuits are always slow compared to optical ones. So they are slow and they are very bulky and they are very costly. They are very power hungry. There are a lot of disadvantages. The other possible way of amplifying it is by using what is called as an optical amplifier. We'll study about this in detail. It's called as an optical amplifier, which does not, so you have a weak optical signal. This can be directly converted to a strong optical signal without converting it into an electrical signal. So you can use a semiconductor device for doing that, or you can use a special kind of amplifier which is called as an optical fiber amplifier. We'll study about this in detail. So optical fiber amplifiers. So in modern technologies, when we are working at 1300s and 1550 nanometer, nowadays we are trying to get rid of these repeaters, because repeaters are very costly. They are also very costly to maintain them, and they have a lot of electronic circuitries and other digital processing techniques which are being used there, so which are very costly and sluggish. So rather than doing this optical to electronic to optical conversion, we would prefer to use what you call as an optical amplifier, or more precisely, an optical fiber amplifier. Okay, I'll stop here. We'll continue in the next class. Any questions?
Sir. So can you move to the previous slide?
Yeah.
Sir, here the 70 kilometer is the total distance of communication, or the distance between transmitter and a first repeater?
Yeah, this one is like you can 70 kilometer. Okay, so you can take this as the distance. Also, this 70 kilometer represents the distance at which you can properly decode, or you can properly recognize the signal. So probably you can take it as the distance between the transmitter to a repeater, or between the repeaters. So this 70 kilometer basically means that you can send the signal from over a distance of 70 kilometer without significant loss, or you can demodulate it properly.
Sir, but like if we multiply 70 with 0.2, like the latest is 0.2 dB per kilometer attenuation, then we get around 15 dB.
You get around?
$14 dB, sir. Hello?
Yeah.
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, you are audible. Yeah, tell me.
Yes, sir. Sir, if we multiply 70 with 0.2, then we get around 14 dB, sir.
If you multiply
70 with... Sorry, sir, someone is muting me, that's why. Okay. Hello, sir. Hello. Hello.
Sir, you are muted, I think.
Yes, sir, you are muted.
So who is doing that? So who is having the master control?
So everyone has a net control actually, sir, here in this meeting.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Sir, so it is around 14 dB loss, sir, with 70 kilometers. So is it like, isn't it as very like huge loss?
It's not really. It's not. No. In fact, this was the experimental. The value what I have written is actually the experimentally demonstrated distance between two repeaters. So it's not the loss happens. So in fact, this loss what I told 0.2 dB per kilometer. So we'll study more about this when we study about the other kind of losses that happens. So this loss is the one, this 0.2 dB per kilometer is the loss that happens for the photons when it just flows through the optical fiber. But you have other kinds of losses as well. For example, you can have coupling loss, you can have alignment loss. So whenever you are trying to launch the signal inside the optical fiber, you will not be able to launch all the signal what you want inside the optical fiber. Some of the signals will also be lost. So you'll have to take into consideration about all those factors. And in fact, by considering all those, this was the figure that was achieved. In fact, 70 kilometer at that time was a big, it was a huge improvement compared to microwave technology or any other technology. Nowadays, this is not the standard. This distance is even larger. So this was reported. I mean, this value is somewhere in the early 1990s or in the late 1980s. So this value is somewhere around 1980s. Sorry. So nowadays, this value has significantly improved. Yeah.
Does the optical amplifier conserve
Yeah.
the polarization of the optical wave?
Does the optical, what is that? Optical?
Amplifier, will it conserve the polarization of the optical wave that is
Optical
traveling?
amplifier, yeah, the fiber amplifier is supposed to maintain the, is supposed to maintain the polarization.
Okay, sir.
But you can always have some kind of polarization conversion. But assuming that the sources, the photons are all coherent, if they are coherent, then obviously their polarization also should be maintained.
Correct, sir. Okay, sir.
If no further questions, I'll stop here. Thank you all.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir.